2nd and 10. Down the middle. He's got him. It's Freiermuth for the touchdown.
That's a big-time throw right here by Russell Wilson.
Yeah, the one to Pat was just a drop back. We had the out route to the left, and then Pat did a really good job. Such a good job in man-to-man. He does a really good job of isolating guys, and he widened the guy, and ended up catching the touchdown there. That was a good job on the line. And then the one to Van is, I think, it's the one you're talking about. It's kind of I don't know. It's a little play that we have that it's a lot of options of what we can do, and Van did a good job getting in there.
Little RPO to Van Jefferson. Beautiful call down there in the red zone. Beautifully executed. And then the throw to Pat Freiermuth. Second most impressive thing to come out of that play, because Freiermuth's punt went like 87 yards. But that was an unbelievable throw by Russell Wilson. Looks to the left, bang, back the other way, threads it in there. And that's my biggest takeaway, Dorin. No George Pickens in the game, and my God, we'll get to that guy. And we'll get to missing him and what that all means, and whether or not he was actually hurt, or if it was a soft suspension from Mike Tomlin or a real suspension from Mike Tomlin. But my biggest takeaway from Steelers 27, Browns 13 is Russ can lead them to the promised land, man. It was ugly in the first half. I think he had 48 yards passing in the first half. He had 46 on the drive to open the second half. Second half, he looked Super Bowl caliber. He did it without his number one target. He can lead them all the way to the ship. And we've seen a lot of great moments from Russ. The best game of his Steelers career, one of the best games of his entire career, was last week against the Bengals. But in some ways, because of no Pickens, because of the slow start, this game might even have been more impressive. That's my biggest takeaway, Dorin.
Yeah, I mean, my takeaway is that they should have beat them like this the first time. And that's what I think it was the same kind of thought process going into that game on a short week. But, there's snow, there's all kinds of things that they're dealing with, but they should have beat them like they did yesterday and the first time. And I know that Cleveland missed some field goals and it could have been a lot closer, but at the end of the day, they took care of their business. It didn't look great. I think Russ ended up having, 158 yards, like you said, or something like that.
Yep.
So Najee, running the football was 53 yards. Jalen Warren, 47 yards. So, they did the things that they did normally, but some other guys had to step up, and some guys did. And it wasn't crazy. It wasn't, a huge kind of monumental step up from some of the skill players, but Scotty Miller stepped up in a way, and, Mike Williams stepped up a couple times, and Van Jefferson has, this 2 games in a row, really, where Van Jefferson has shown up in a significant portion of the game. So, it was a win that was needed, and they knew that they needed to win that football game, whatever it took, and they did it, and now they're going to move on. And, they're really putting themselves in a good spot here down this final stretch. They're really putting themselves in a good spot, and you watch some other games yesterday. You saw the Bills lose to the Rams, and the Chiefs having another close game. So the Steelers, I think, are trying to hit their peak at the right time.
Yes, and they still didn't play their perfect, complete game. We've been waiting for that. We've talked about that. Special teams, yeah, your kicker's really good. Their kicker's really bad. You give up that huge kickoff return to start the second half. That made me crazy. Defensively, you give up 2 touchdowns. You're going to take that. 14 points, and you really held Jameis Winston mostly in check, and that's a guy who he beat you not that long ago, and then the 2 other games wrapped around that, he's thrown for 400, 500 yards. So you slowed him down. The defense played really well. Offensively, the first half was crap. The second half, pretty good. So, yeah, they didn't put it together fully. But here they are, Dorin. We've talked ad nauseum in the offseason, in the lead-up to this second half of the season schedule. This is the toughest stretch that the Steelers have ever faced. This is the toughest schedule in the NFL. And this is when it really gets hard, these next 3 games. But we talked about after the bye, it's going to be a pain in the ass. 4-1. 4-1. Go on the road to Washington, squeak it out. Beat Baltimore at home. You lose to Cleveland, still pisses me off. Then you go and you beat Cincinnati at their own game. You come back at home, you take care of business. They're 4-1 in the first 5 games of this gauntlet in the second half. And that tells me, man, yeah, they can win this thing. I don't know that they're the favorite. Of course they're not. I mean, I still look at Buffalo, even though they lost yesterday, as probably the bigger favorite in the AFC. You look at Kansas City, and no matter how ugly it is, they are a team with one loss on the season. You look at the Lions, you look at the Eagles, and we're going to get a close personal view here, an up-close view at these guys this weekend. The Steelers, though, are on the short list. 4-1 in these 5 games, and we're going to find out an awful lot these next 3 games. What's your biggest takeaway? 412-928-9370. Biggest takeaway from the Steelers' victory over the Cleveland Browns. You can give us a call, as you always do, on the fan hotline, presented by Sullivan Super Service, Pittsburgh trusted plumbing and HVAC provider for over 50 years. You can tweet us, brought to you by South Hills Kia Peters Township. Visit them at southhillskia.net. And that number, 412-928-9370. You can text us, brought to you by Edgar Snyder and Associates, a personal injury law firm where they always say there's never a fee unless we get money for you. The counting stats at the end of the day looked really good for Myles Garrett. But you know what? You knew coming into this game you can't let him wreck the game. You knew Jameis Winston and Jerry Jeudy couldn't wreck the game. That's what those guys had done of late. And I thought the Steelers did a good job against all of them, Dorin. Jameis Winston, you sack him 3 times. He drops back, throws it 41 times, 212 yards. You pick him off twice, right? You don't want Nick Chubb to beat you. 11 carries, 48 yards. I mentioned Jeudy. 5 catches, 64 yards. Yes, he caught a touchdown, but 64 yards for that guy ain't nothing compared to what he had been doing. And then you look at Myles Garrett, 3 total tackles, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, and he did have the fumble recovery. You really held all their big-time players in check, which is, to me, the mark of the coaching staff doing a great job.
Mm-hmm. No, they did, absolutely. They knew the game plan, and, Jameis Winston did have 28 yards rushing. So you could look at that and say, well, the Steelers, they play Jalen Hurts, and, Patrick Mahomes likes to run a little bit. And if you do get in the playoffs and you play the Bills, what Josh Allen likes to do. But I feel like that they're so game plan specific with quarterbacks that can run. They have been all year, and they've done a good job with stopping that I think in this game they weren't that specific about worrying about Jameis Winston running. So they're like, go ahead and run all day.
Yeah.
You're not going to beat us running. You aren't going to beat us running. So if you're worried about that, okay, I could see that because that is a significant amount of rushing yards for Jameis Winston, but that was not their game plan going into this game. They were going to, let him do that if he really wanted to, and he did, and they didn't win the football game. So that's just kind of one little thing that you could look at and say, like, all right, you're going to face a lot of running quarterbacks. That's not how it would look.
No, they hit him with a sneaky zone read at one point for 12 yards, and then he had 16 yards scrambling. You live with it.
Yeah.
You live with it. He's good getting outside the pocket and making throws. The touchdown pass to Jeudy was beautiful. There was a miscommunication on the back end for the Steelers, but for him to square his shoulders and hit that throw, you kind of throw your hands up and go, all right, That's a nice play. And he's been playing up and down football, but he's capable of making big-time throws, which he did. Not a ton, I don't think, in negatives to take out of this. I wish that Arthur Smith wasn't so in love with Cordero Patterson. It's not that CP's a bad player. I just don't think he ever got right after the injury. Before the injury, he looked really good, but even when he's returning kicks, he looks slow. He looks slow when they're handing him the football. He doesn't look super explosive in the passing game. And then you're trying to salt the thing away, and you get a little tricky, you get a little cute, and he fumbles the football. Jalen Warren was money in this game. Najee Harris was money early. Just, guys, don't get too cute.
I will say this, and I saw a lot of people say, like, what you just said, and it's warranted to an extent with Arthur Smith and Cordero Patterson. But during a football game, the rotation of players, rotations of receivers, rotations of running backs, rotations on the back end, it is definitely specific to the call of the individual coach. So Eddie Faulkner is the reason why Cordero Patterson was in at that point, not Arthur Smith.
Well, then, Eddie Faulkner, you should be shaming yourself, man.
Eddie Faulkner's like, all right, 84, you're in. This is your series. Arthur Smith, he puts in the game plan. Is like, okay, I like these plays for these certain guys, but Eddie Faulkner is the one that's rotating the base of the plays of the running backs.
And if I'm thinking it through for the why, okay, Jalen Warren's had a lot of success. What does Jalen Warren also do to him? Fumble the football.
And Najee, I think, had just ran, and he needed a blow at that point. So
they hand it over to Cordero Patterson, who you don't expect to fumble in that situation, and he does. You're really nitpicking at that point. I thought some of the personnel decisions, particularly in the red zone early, left me scratching my head. But, if you believe Mike Tomlin, we'll get into that at 7 o'clock, they didn't know George Pickens wasn't going to play until like 10 minutes before the inactives were announced. That's when Scotty Miller was like, hey, you're getting a helmet, and he puts his clothes on, or he takes his clothes off, puts the uniform on. So we'll get into all that if you believe Tomlin. If you don't believe Tomlin, on George Pickens coming up at 7 o'clock. All in all, I wore the suit a couple of weeks ago before the Steelers played the Browns. It's a business trip. Go take care of business. That's what they did in this game. It was ugly at first. Second half, I thought, was more aesthetically pleasing, but you got the dub. You needed the dub. You've got hell coming your way these next 3 weeks. 3 games in 11 days. You had to stack this one. If the Steelers win in Philly for the first time since 1965, ladies and gentlemen, your Pittsburgh Steelers will be in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
If the Steelers lose again in Philadelphia, so long as the Colts lose and the Dolphins lose this weekend, and they're both 2.5 or more point underdogs, you're in the playoffs. So you either win or tie and you're in, or those teams lose and tie and you're in. This could be the weekend the Steelers clinch a playoff spot, punch their ticket. If the Steelers lose this game, but win in Baltimore, they are AFC North Division champions. And isn't it nice that with 4 games to go, we're talking about this stuff?
Yes.
And it's not waiting until the final game of the season are the Titans going to beat the Jags to get the Steelers? Can the Steelers go on the road in rainy Baltimore and slide their way into the playoffs? No, it's fun now.
It's not in that situation where it's like, okay, they need to win this last game, but also having that thought in the back of your mind where they're probably going to lose it in the first round of playoffs. Like last year. It's like, oh, man, they need to win this last game to get in. But you know that the ultimate ending to this is, they're going to lose in the first round. At least they got in, though. Hey, at least they got to the playoffs. Now it's like, hey, they clinch. They got a chance.
You're right.
A chance to go for a long time.
Yeah, at this point, it's like someone misses a free throw and you're all boxing out. You're jockeying for position. That's what you got going on right now. Real quick, this from Chris Adamski of the Trib. I wanted to slide this into the first segment. Russell Wilson, a passer rating in the game of 101. So he has eclipsed the 100 mark in his passer rating in 5 of his 7 starts for the Steelers. Kenny Pickett did that once in 24 starts. Mitch Trubisky once in 7 starts. Mason Rudolph 5 times in 13 starts. And then this one's insane to me. Big Ben 6 times in his final 22 career starts.
Wow.
6 times for Big Ben in 22 starts. 5 already for Russell Wilson in 7 starts. That's why my biggest takeaway is this guy can lead you to a Lombardi trophy.